So we will continue this theme today. We already talked about genetic algorithms. Today I want to talk about other mechanisms of order, and one of my scientific heroes that uh, really thought about it a lot, and he has several books that you can read. One of them is The Origins of Order, another one, At Home in the Universe, and finally, very recent one, Reinventing the Sacred, actually. He went into that business too. And you can see that, let's get some of his quotes. So, the second law of thermodynamics has been thought to be rather gloomy. One almost imagines the grave headlines: universe running down, heat death headed our ways, disorder is order of the day. Right? Thermodynamics tells you that everything will get colder and colder until there is no availability left. Do you know what availability is? Some of you do. It's like temperature gradient is one of the ways to get things done, right? What if you reach this maximum entropy, there is no temperature gradient, nothing is left. How far we have come from the blessed children of God at the center of the universe, walking among creatures created for our benefit. In a garden called Eden, science, not sin, has indeed lost us our paradise. This is, of course, poetic ways of talking about entropy and science. It is not entropy, but the extraordinary surge towards order that strikes me. Trees grabbing sunlight from a star 8 light minutes away, swirling its photons together with mere water and carbon dioxide to cook up sugars and fancier carbohydrates. So do you see that he is looking for these laws of order? Thermodynamics be damned. Genesis, thanks whatever Lord may be, has occurred, we all thrive. Of course, this doesn't mean at all that he doesn't understand thermodynamics. Probably he does understand thermodynamics much better than many people. But he is just saying that it's not all that gloomy. There are laws of order that will exploit thermodynamical increase in the entropy and to create some order. So let's see his place in our map. Maybe I can switch to here so that I can write some stuff and zoom in. Okay. I forgot to do this part. Sorry about this. So let's do it again. Yes, we don't need to do anything else, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and continue from here. You can see that we have actually covered some of this map, right? Do you see John Holland? We didn't mention his name, but we learned some genetic algorithms, right? So Stuart Kauffman is at the center of all these things, and he contributed significantly to the concept of emergence. We talked about dynamical systems, fractal geometry, chaos theory, right? And we talked about cellular automata, and etc. We will come to Robert Axelrod too, and the network science in the next sections. Okay. So let me go back to the laws of order. Okay, this is one of the laws of order. There are many, as I mentioned earlier. So let's say you have chemicals A and B. Do you remember this before from the first lecture? So let's say A and B can have two reactions. It can be AB, can form AB, or BA. These are two different chemicals. What if this one catalyzes that one and that one catalyzes this one? This is the simplest autocatalytic reaction set. But just imagine all the network of chemical reactions. And if somehow there is a one line that closes upon itself, it's basically chemical self-replication. So those chemicals, so if you look at the system as a whole, the entropy will increase for sure, right? But you will see something forming and forming, some orders forming, and they will form at the expense of forming disorder even faster. I hope it does make sense. So in total, the disorder will increase, but locally you can have some order. So we mentioned compartmentalization. Let me mention one more time. This is, I believe, also one of the laws of order. So we asked, are we a bag of chemicals? And we said, we are much more than that. We are bags of chemicals, right? So what do we mean by bags of chemicals? Let's think that this bigger loop wants to have needs A and B separately, okay? It engulfs AB, or is there a better word than engulf? What is the biological term for this? Uh, absorbs, intakes AB, but it needs A and B separately, let's say, okay? And let's say inside this reaction is of low probability, okay? But it has another bag inside it, which actually beforehand accumulated some chemical C, which catalyzes this process. So this inner bag intakes, again, AB inside. And here this reaction becomes of high probability. And once it's done, it gives out A and B. So this big stuff gets A and B because it has this small stuff. So if it was a cell, what would this be? Yes, and which organelle in particular? I always thought of it as lysosome. Do you agree? Like a place where things get broken down. Does it have a higher pH? Inside low pH. And that is achieved by what process? I mean, how lysosome manages to have low pH. It doesn't matter. It has some process going on that makes it low pH, but the whole thing is not low pH. So you have some place where you can break down stuff. So these boundaries make improbable stuff possible. Does it make sense to everyone? Besides, many things that I'm going to say today is speculative, but this is another one. The idea of self is born. So once you have the boundary, whatever inside is the self, whatever outside is the others. Okay? So, and that idea goes on, and until it reaches us, we have this idea of the self, right, in our minds. Okay, let me talk about, so autocatalytic reaction sets were mainly developed that idea was mainly developed by Stuart Kauffman, as I mentioned. This is another impressive idea of Stuart Kauffman. Did I already mention this to you? I think no. So have you heard of the word epigenetics? No? Can you tell us what it is? Exactly. So correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say you have some DNA, okay? And DNA possesses some genes, right? But they are not always active, okay? They are not always expressed. So you can think of the genes as binary values. So is that gene on or off, 0 or 1, okay? Epigenetics, especially the on and off states of these genes, are especially important during the development. Okay, once things get settled down, it plays less role, but especially during the morphogenesis, it's important. So, what Kaufman thought about is, let's think about these genes as on and off states. Okay, so let's say, and let's how this on and off will be controlled. How you can control, how the cells manage to control their own states, whether they will be 0 or 1. Uh, there was some idea around, and Kaufman took it and put it into work. So the idea is that some genes, for example, two genes, the state of two genes decide what the state of the third gene will be. Does it make sense? For example, gene 1 and 2, let's say if it's, let's just randomly attribute some rules. Let's say 1 and 2 decides what 3 is going to be according to this truth table. And I came up with this truth table purely randomly, just by typing ones and zeros. Are you following so far? So let's say right now the cell has this state. What will be the state of the gene number 3 in the next run? Okay. 1, exactly, because 0, 0 gives you 1. What will be the state of the first one? Which one decides the first one? 3, 4. They are 0, 0, then this will be 0, right? So if you do all this, you will get the next state of the genes, the on-off states. Well, let's do it for all possible combinations of on and off. Okay? So 0, 0, 0 goes to 0, 1, 1, 0, right? And that goes to this one, etc. Do you see something here? Please use the word you learned from nonlinear dynamics. Yes, exactly. An attractor, right? A fixed point. A loop that attracts all possible states. Although you had 16 different possibilities, the system, this randomly found rules, attracts the system to some point. So this is a huge, huge law of order, and you will see why it is so impressive. Because Kaufman tried it with, let's say, 100 genes. So for 4 genes, you have 2 to the 4 different possibilities, right? Of zeros and ones, which makes 16. What about 100 genes? How many possible states do you have? 2 to the 100, right? But he realized that the number of attractors are way lower than 2 to the 100. It's only around 10 or something. It goes with the square root of the number of genes, okay? So if he stopped there, it wouldn't be as impressive as I'm going to tell you. He claimed that these attractors correspond to different cell types. Can you tell me why that's a good idea? Attractors correspond. Tell me.
Is it because when the fetus is developing, and because I think at the beginning there's only one type of the stem cells, and then
Yes.
they start separating into,
Yes.
so I guess whichever direction the evolution takes will end up with
Yes.
whichever direction the gene evolution takes
Yes.
will give you the end.
Yes. For example, a neuron cell could correspond to one of those loops, right? And that loop is a stable loop, right? You can see how stable it is wherever you distort it. If you make some genes off by accident, it will still come back to itself eventually, right? So what he did is to plot in the log-log scale the number of genes and the number of different cell types. So according to his calculations, which is purely speculative, right? You speculate about the possible rules of control. You speculate that only 2 genes are controlling the third one. Maybe 3 genes are controlling. And this is his line for number attractors, like number of genes versus number of attractors. But if you indeed write the number of model genes, the number of actual genes in actual organisms versus the number of cell types, it also fits nicely into a line in a log-log scale. So you can see that these boolean loops, genetic networks, uh, create this uh, order. What about intelligence? So, yes, tell me. Yes.
I still latch on to what you said. You said if the cell is thrown off of this stable
Yes.
loop, then it will return to it. But can you say anything about what happens with, for example, cancer? When the DNA is modified a certain way, then, for example, there will be a second attractor. So the cell will not go back to its. I mean, the same genes will not be built again. You'll start getting a different
concept of mutation. So not all even twins, they have differences. You have the same identical starting points, but
Yes. We will come to that. That's so what. Okay, let me first answer your question. I just searched for the word cancer in his paper, and it didn't come up. But since you opened the subject, let's realize that it's 1969 when there were less cancer in the world, or we cared about it less. Do you understand my point? Maybe we thought back at those times that it's practically incurable or something. It's a very early study. I also wanted to point out that it's Department of Anatomy and research labs of electronics in MIT. So, and in general, this guy is like a medical doctor, theoretical biologist, and complex systems researcher. So, I didn't answer your question. Partly, maybe I answered it, but it's a good research topic, right? What happens if you distort these on and off states, where it goes, right? Very good point.
And actually, the rules are changing. Like cancer.
Yes.
Changes the rules. So that's why it's going somewhere else.
So it's actually changing the genes themselves, right? So maybe it's basically cancer. Basically, cancer stops cells to go through apoptosis, I believe, right? Programmed death. Do you know how many cells die each day in an adult?
It's in the billions.
It's in the billions. How many billions? 70 billions, around that. Okay, so dying is important, and dying without leaving a mess. So that's what we call apoptosis. There's another way of dying in the cells, which is when you hit someone or something happens. That's a different kind of dying, where also bad stuff come out, and other cells get influenced by that. But apoptosis is a programmed clean death, okay, and we need it. If we didn't need it, we wouldn't have it 70 billion times every day, right? And cancer basically tricks cells to immortality. That's a problem. Okay. What about intelligence? This is just some paper. Don't take it super seriously. But when I first read this paper, I couldn't sleep that night. So let's talk about intelligence. What intelligence does? What do? We want something. We want to build it, right? We cannot wait for it to grow on the trees, right? So what we do, for example, to build this pencil, right? We go and this is Apple Pencil, so it has a lot of stuff to be done, right? So you have to create electronics for it, the metals, etc. Each one of them is a process. Doesn't matter. What any process does increases entropy, right? So intelligence actually creates ordered structures at the expense of increasing entropy even faster. Are you following? Yes? So what if we come up with what if we look at in reverse? Let's take an object, okay, and instead of moving it according to physical rules, let's move that object according to the maximization of future entropy. Let me give you a minute for it to sink. So a ball goes around, entropy increases. Okay. But what about maximization of future entropy? Like, for example, if there is a ball in some box in the room, this object that is moved according to maximization of entropy would like to take that ball out, because then the ball can explore all other possibilities. Do you understand the point? So we are looking at it in reverse, and if we do this, will it behave as if it is intelligent?
What do you mean the reverse? Like the ball going from maximum to...
Let me show you a video. So just watch this big ball, okay, and this small one and this small one. So this big ball will be moved according to the maximization of future entropy. So let's see what it does. It takes this small ball, it kicks it to this other ball so that it can take it out. Isn't it what we do when something is left at the bottom of a cup and we try to take it out with a spoon? Intelligent behavior, okay? Tool use. It uses the small ball to take the big ball out, to take the other ball out. But there's that is not coded in the big ball. Like you have to take everything out. No, it's just. By the way, it takes a time. It's not that intelligent, okay? Because it kicks it in again. So, anyways, but do you see the point here? Yes. Let's watch this one now. It's a pendulum, okay? It's a normal pendulum, and we will move this part according to the maximization of future entropy, future possibilities. Okay, what will happen? It will move in such a way that the pendulum goes up. Why? Because then you have more possibilities. The pendulum can fall like this, something can happen. So rather than pendulum sitting just like that. Of course, if you speculate too much, you take this idea and you take it to why human actually walk on 2 feet, because that's more possibilities. Okay? And one more thing. For example, if you leave a ball in a room, okay, it will go to a center of the room. Intelligent behavior. Do you remember that scene from Artificial Intelligence movie by Steven Spielberg? The robots would come together, although they are not programmed to do that. Anyways, that just reminds me that. Are you following?
Yeah, I mean, sir, maximization of entropy is how things would, I mean, all physical processes, they move towards the state where entropy is maximized, right? We just did that with the atoms.
Yes.
They always go to that curve where entropy is
yes.
maximized. Of all the possibilities, they will always choose that one.
Yes, it's continue your question and I will answer.
So, I mean, this...
What is different here? Right?
Yeah, this is just normal versus...
So...
What is the new science here? We already knew that everything moves towards...
It's more a speculation than science for now, but everything starts like that, right? With a speculation. So what I mean is, just think of a human being as a number of atoms, okay? Would it talk? Would it grab a pen and write? No, right? Thermodynamically impossible, right? But what we do is we have this self that started with the first lipid layer, right? And now we are here, we have the self, and we want to do that, right? And we go ahead and do it at the expense of eating earlier some poor animal, right? By the way, that's also something else. Like, the animals grow, they feed like 10 years of life, and we just cook them one meal. So that's how it's a sad story, but that's what it is. Like, the more intelligence, the faster you create this. So notice that that order took 10 years to become what it is, and it was not as greedy as we were, right? It's just eating some grass. But we take it and just eat it. And so we break all that information very fastly. We create much more. So that's, and now if you look at it in reverse, the more the maximization of entropy, the maximization of entropy. Do you understand my point? Yes. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
So is the basic concept that intelligent behavior is due to some thermodynamic state that things go to?
If we are looking for a...
My
My point is that if we are looking at it causally, then intelligence causes much faster increase in the entropy. Are we done? Do we agree in this? And this is the causal way of looking at it. But if we reverse this, if we just take a system and choose one actor and act it so that the entropy is maximized, then that actor behaves as if it is intelligent. Okay? Good. So let's. We talked about this, right? And we said that if you go directly from code to fitness and from fitness to code, then you get a genetic algorithm. But how on earth do you go from a code to a form? How the form is formed, starting with one single cell, and it becomes what it is. I have a model, a very simple toy model that has less than 100 lines. But I think it's a good place to stop and discuss the projects a little bit. And in the next hour, I will talk about this model. So I will stop.